G'day everyone, welcome along to another Toon podcast on the back of the breaking news that the club has decided that we can't celebrate stuff as normal clubs would. A nice end to the season, unexpected fifth place finish despite losing against Everton. And just as the happiness kicks in, we have a bombshell drop that Paul Mitchell has decided to leave Newcastle United with the phrase used is mutual consent as per usual. We're here to dive into what happened, what this means for the club. Joining me today is Bobby and Lee. We're going to dive in straight away. We're going to try and keep this quick and short to the point. So let's have a bit of a wrap up of what's actually happened here. So obviously Newcastle United never like doing things easy. They never like keeping things simple and calm for the fans. But Paul Mitchell going, the director of football, obviously he joined the club under some initial shenanigans with Eddie Howe, shall we say. There seemed to be a little bit of a locking of heads, shall we say. But he joined less than a year ago today under a guise of replacing Dan Ashworth as the director of football for Newcastle United. It was bringing in a new era. It was the way forward. It was building the club in the right direction. So obviously this has come as out of the blue. He was apparently at the celebrations after the final whistle on Sunday against Everton. So yeah, it has sort of like caught a lot of people by surprise. So Bobby, I'm going to lead in with you first because I think Lee's just going to have a bit of a rant about this. So we'll lead to him as and when we can. But you know, what's your take of what's actually happened in terms of how this has caught everyone off guard? And do you think this has anything to do, before we get into like the whys and wherefores, do you think this has got anything to do with Darren Eales stepping down, given that he joined on the back of Darren Eales being at the club?
Who fucking knows? Like this is the thing. We don't have we don't have a clue what's going on at the moment. Like we can't have any stability at the top end, and you know, it's frustrating as a club to be, you know, in a position like we are and not have that key personnel working together and working, you know, systematically for a long-term vision, which is what we were promised as well. So, yeah, it's very frustrating at the moment, and I'm not too sure. It's too early to tell what happened, or that'll all come.
Yep, Bobby's locked again. So we are experiencing some technical difficulties transmitting from Brisbane to Melbourne, apparently. It's all of the traffic online ready for the State of Origin. Sorry, you're locked up there, mate.
Yeah, sorry, mate. Yeah, so I don't know. Like I just it'll come out in the washout who was at fault or what happened. But for me, it's just frustrating as a club with the guidance of the Saudi, you know, way they do things, to be in a position where we're losing our director of football every year. So it's not good enough.
Yeah, it's the director of football role, as we were sold it as fans, was a way for us to build for the future, prop the academy up, get that pipeline of players coming through, a steady stream of saleable assets, if not first team players. It was that was kind of what we were sold it as. So it's a long-term future. Lee, you know, sort of, what did you make of his appointment at the time, given it was on the back of Dan Ashworth leaving, and there was always this talk where Dan Ashworth and Eddie Howe never got along? What did you make of Paul Mitchell joining in the first place, and what did you see his impact? Maybe not what his impact has been, because I don't think we've got a large enough sample size, given he's buggered off already. But what did you see him long term bringing to the club?
Yeah, look, this whole side of things is kind of not really my bag when it comes to the technicalities of how a club should run upstairs. And we should probably sort of just point out that we're just three plebs here. Like, we don't have any inside track on anything that's going on at the club. These are literally just our opinions, what we've seen, what we've heard, what we've been thinking about all this time. It was an absolute bombshell. You're absolutely right there, Mark. Like, just as we're settling into the idea of Champions League and starting to think about massive signings that we're going to do, the DOF fucks off, doesn't he? So that was less than ideal preparation just ahead of the transfer window. When Mitchell signed, it was good in the sense that we'd actually managed to replace Dan Ashworth. Now, he's got the best garden in England by this point. He's went off to Manchester, and funny enough, I asked the guys in our Telegram chat, like, what do you think's going on here? And I think it was Joey says, I reckon Paul Mitchell's fucked up to Manchester United.
I thought that as well. I actually thought that as soon as he'd gone,
which would be absolutely hilarious because he'll be out of work in about 6 months' time. Yeah, so I was pleased that the position had been filled. If that was the model that the big wigs were kind of trying to put in place, and Eddie Howe, as much as he's the king and everything like that, and he'll be a legend forever, and he should have a statue. He's one man. He can't do all of the various roles that need to be filled. He could give it a good shot. I have no doubt that he'd have a good shot at it. But sooner or later, it's going to become too much, and particularly this season with Champions League and everything else to deal with. I really took a lead from Bobby, because Bobby you were excited about this appointment, mate, because you had a bit of prior knowledge, I think, didn't you? Or a little bit of understanding of what this guy was, what he was about. So when this news dropped, I actually thought you were angry in the chat, but as you clarified, you're just really, really, really disappointed, right? Like, so I was going off your energy when this guy signed. Like, Bobby, tell us why this guy was a good idea in the first place.
Oh, like, his record speaks for itself. Everywhere he's gone, he was able to buy players before they peaked, and they all turned out to be quality international stars. And everywhere he went, success followed him, which is the idea of a director of football. He basically can architect a list build with not infinite money. So it was a smart choice. We talk about Howe being systematic and the way he goes about it. This is what this guy does as well. So that's why he was a good choice for me, but there was something off from the start.
Well, he came in like a bull in a china shop, didn't he? And he was telling everybody how crap our transfer strategy was. And it's like, you're kind of looking at that thinking, well, we've kind of bought some pretty decent players, so we can't be doing all bad. And we've not really missed on any players. Yes, we've overspent. Maybe it was about the PSR issues. But if you look at, like, we've had, what, 3.5 years of the new owners now. We've basically won the first major trophy for the club in 70 years. Well, the first domestic cup in 70 years. We've finished in the Champions League twice in 3 seasons. It's hardly like that we're struggling and we're really shitting the bed with everything. So it did seem like he came in with a point to prove. Conspiracy theories abound, and I've seen everything from, it was a power struggle with Howe, and Howe's obviously won back on the back of the previous season. I've seen people suggest that, Mitchell's actually the one that's been trying to overly control everything, and he's been trying to dictate to Howe what needs to happen. And I've also seen things where, like, he's struggled, and it was maybe Darren Eales that brought him in, and the initial outburst was to try and unsettle Howe because Darren Eales wanted a different manager in place or something. So, obviously all the fans have lost their shit over this, as per usual. Half the fan base is on social media at the moment, like, chomping at the bit, saying, oh, this is all Eddie Howe's fault, and you can't go on like this. And the other half are saying, well, Eddie Howe's done pretty well, let's just let Steve Nixon go. Lee, do you see this as like a power struggle with Eddie Howe, or do you see this as like maybe it wasn't going all of Mitchell's way, and this is kind of like more a vote of confidence in Eddie Howe and the job that he's done?
It could absolutely be that. I mean, you look at how this is all kind of unfolded, and we go by what we see. Obviously, there'll be a whole mound of stuff that we're not even privy to, lots of details that we're not actually hearing, not yet, at least anyway. You finish the final game, you get the Champions League, you go upstairs and you have a meeting with the Saudi PIF guys, and everyone's involved. And then hours later, your main guy, director of football, decide that it's not good enough for him. Now, one of the prevailing rumors, and it's been going on for a while now, is that, touched on what Bobby just said, actually, is that Mitchell was more focused on unearthing gems, if you like, if I can put it that way, like looking for players that are going to be good, like a Hugo Ekiteke, who is now allegedly sort of worth 100 million. Craig was just saying in the chat before there. We were after him 18 months ago, whatever it was, and he was going nothing like that kind of money. But then he went to PSG, then he went somewhere else, and now he's worth tons. the suggestion was in this rumor, I'm not saying it's true, just a rumor, that that was the kind of deal that Mitchell wanted to do, wanted to take the club forward. Maybe even a bit like the Brighton model, where you bring them in, you develop them, you can flog a few if you need the money, keep the good ones, that sort of thing. Whereas on the counter to that, Eddie Howe is very much of I want Premiership quality proven players. Now, this could just be a thing for this summer even. It doesn't necessarily have to, I mean, all the other players that were brought in aren't necessarily Premier League proven. Bruno wasn't, Isak wasn't,
No.
They've turned out to be absolutely fantastic signings, but they didn't have that experience. So Eddie might be looking at this summer and saying, right, I need Mbeumo, or I need some other bloke, right? And they're from other teams in this league, and you're going to pay top dollar for them. And Paul Mitchell might have said, look, that's not the direction that I want to go in. I've been working for the last 12 months trying to go down this direction. You're now saying, just chuck that all in the bin and go for these ready-made guys at top dollar. And we can't do a lot with that. You just have to buy them and hope it works. And then, maybe Piff have said, well, you know what, Paul? Yes, you sold Lloyd Kelly for 20 million. We're not going to take that away from him. That was a cracking bit of business. Well done. But here's Eddie Howe. He is now the king of Newcastle. He's won a cup and he's got us into Champions League twice. If he reckons he needs a certain type of player, I'm sorry, mate, but we're going to go with him, because he like, if it came down to it, like, you tell me, you guys, you tell me, right? If it came down to it, who would Piff rather keep, Eddie Howe or Paul Mitchell? If it was down to, like, it's either me or him situation, it's going to be Eddie Howe every day of the week. Right?
Yeah, well, I think that's been something that's been intimated about, like, maybe he's not been backed in the market in the last 3 windows because they were waiting to see what was happening, and could he deliver? Could he put us into Champions League? He's done that. He's delivered a trophy. So I don't see what more he could have done to secure his position and give himself that credit in the bank, so to speak. And I'll also say this. As a manager, I don't think it's fair to expect someone who's just done that and qualified for Europe to go into the European season in the Champions League against all the top teams in Europe with having to kind of bring through some youngsters who may or may not fit and may or may not work out, and then judging him on the back of that. Obviously, Eddie Howe's going to want some established players to bolster his squad. I don't think Eddie Howe's under the illusion that he's going to get 15 first-team players signed that are all absolute world-class stars. But I think he's done enough where, he sees where we need to strengthen to make that next step, but it needs to be improvements. And to make those improvements, you've got to buy those ready-made players. Yeah. We can still be doing all of that business in the back end, but there's no way a director of football, and this is something I've always felt about director of football positions in the first place, I don't believe that a director of football should be imposing what he thinks on the manager of that club. There is a scope for a bigger picture, so that if the manager does leave, then there is continuity. But with a manager like Eddie Howe, I don't think you can be telling him after the seasons the couple of seasons he's just had, that, you know what, I don't like your model. It's not what I want to do. I want to go and you want to have this player, this player, this player. You'll make do with the players I give you. And then the manager's kind of got to go out there and get the best out of these players, even though it's not the player that he wants for his style of football.
Yeah, and to be fair, that does happen in other clubs. That is basically how that model works, isn't it? The director goes out and gets these guys, shoves them on top of the manager and says, right, make something out of that rabble. But like what you just said there, you compare what Eddie Howe's managed to do in the last 12 months compared to what Paul Mitchell's managed to do in 12 months. I appreciate the jobs are different, but one guy's done an awful lot. And the other guy, on the surface, I repeat, that's all we can see, has done very little. Yeah. So like if it was a simple equation as that, you'd say, well, Eddie Howe every day of the week. Sorry, Bobby.
No, that's all right. It's basically they've got to be aligned, don't they? They have to from the start, and if it's not aligned, it hasn't been aligned from the start. So it's basically that simple.
I think if you look at there's a lot of people suggesting, look, put Nixon in charge, put him in the director of football role, Eddie Howe's son or nephew, or whatever it is, at at the chief scout kind of thing. They all seem to work well. They all seem to work together. There seems to be that boundary knowledge between them all. They all work in the same direction. Nixon's have been a great talent scout for us. His his network is pretty impressive. So I'm actually not adverse to that as an option.
No, you know what? It's like I don't know. I mean, we can sort of talk about this on and off for ages, but end of the day, the Town has now ended up just going into the frigging window with knee-busted DOF. You know, you could say Nixon's done great and all that, and you could say a little bit of nepotism goes a long way and whatever, but you could have made that decision 12 months ago instead of bringing Paul Mitchell in. If they were going to do it now,
Yeah,
why wouldn't they have just done it 12 months ago, you know? Because now what we've got is a guy who potentially has done all this kind of background work and he's geared up to have a big summer because he kind of ballsed it with that Mark Gahey thing, sorry. He's going to have a big summer. Everyone's got massive expectations. We're picking out Mbwemes and all these other kind of guys. And now he's just buggered off. Now he's going to leave at the end of June. There is still a grace period there where maybe some of his plans can be put into action. But you have to think, if it's bad enough a situation for him to leave, then presumably those plans aren't going to be fitting in with what we want to do either. So those plans are probably useless. He might even be involved in getting the successor in. Who knows? So you are effectively going into this transfer window with next to nothing ready to go. And Eddie's been saying repeatedly over the last few weeks, we've got to be fast, we've got to be quick, we've got to get in there. First doors, early doors, get in there, get the ones we want because they'll be gone. And look what's just went and happened.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
It is a bit of a kick in the ass, like for the club. I think it's just disappointing, as Bobby said. It's like it's that we were geared up for a big summer. Like, you know, we gambled in January. We needed to have a big summer to justify not spending in the last 3 windows, basically. You know, we've sold talent, we've sold players, we've got money in. We should be getting sponsorship deals sorted. We should be in a comfortable PSR position. So if we don't have a decent window, then yeah, to me, alarm bells are going to start ringing about the club and what direction they are actually wanting to go in, and who's pulling the strings and what their actual end game is. Bobby, like,
there's no excuses. There's no excuses for a bad window. None.
No,
we can't afford one. We can't afford to have a bad window. Not now. Not with Champions League coming up. This is like the worst. I mean, if we had feelers out for particular players going through Paul Mitchell and now he's not there anymore, what do we expect those people on the other end to be thinking about those kind of getting tapped up or getting the suggestion put them to go to Newcastle? They might just look at that and go, it's a fucking basket case there. Let's go somewhere else. That's a little bit more stable. Let's go to the people who will be there when our boy joins, rather than like maybe my client joins and then this guy's already gone and people there didn't want him in the first place. Now he's in a situation where he's not wanted anymore. I mean, you can say that about managers, but you can probably just as equally say it about the DOFs if they're making the actual
it's a strange call. Bobby, what's your view on where we go from here? Should the club be pulling the stops out to get another DOF in? Is it going to be a case of waiting to see who the new CEO is and trying to organize something? Should we just let Howe have the window and just say, right, well, this is on you, but you know, how much pressure does that put on Howe for next season? Because he's going to be judged on the back of this window now. Oh, Bobby's frozen.
I think his signal's fucked
Over
up.
to you, Lee.
His signal's buggered off with Paul Mitchell, I think. The other thing I was going to say as well is James Buns. What do we do with James Buns now? He's like Paul Mitchell's best mate. Is he going to fuck off as well?
Yeah, that's the concern for me. I think Buns has definitely made an impact in terms of there's no way we would have gotten through this season with the squad that we had playing as many minutes and games as we have without like Buns making the changes that he's made.
Yeah, so sorry about that. What do we do? We've got to be patient now, and I think Howe has to have this window. I think, you know, Howe and the team that's already established, they need to have this window to get it right. We can't be going out and getting a new director of football and going in another strategic way. It's too late. Yep. So this window, just stick with what we've got, and then we've got to have the model that works for everyone in the future. That's not thought now. The thought now is just get through.
Yeah, it's one of those things where the last thing we need is to start messing about and have something going on in the background that changes the tack of what we were meant to be doing. We, as Howe says, as Lee said, Howe's been adamant we need to move quickly. You know, Lee, what's the best case scenario coming from this? What's the worst case scenario coming from this in terms of what the club can move forward for? Because to me, the big alarm bell is fans are already turning on Howe because this is all his fault and he's the one that's antagonizing him. And this is two director of footballs he's chased out the door. At what point does he then feel the pressure of, well, I've got to get this right now because this is on me, or the fans at least are going to think it's on me? What's the state of play with that?
There's no point in trying to work out what the fans are going to do because the fans we've got fuckwits everywhere. So like it doesn't really matter.
Thanks for subscribing, everyone.
Good night. Doesn't matter what Eddie does. Doesn't matter what he doesn't do. There'll be some fuckwit out there who complains about it. It's just the way it is. That's with everything in life, not just this. Worst case scenario is that we do nothing this winter again, or we panic at the end of the season, end of the windows, and we pull in somebody who we don't really want. But it's better than having bad headlines, or it's better than having an even more stale squad. And the squad is very stale at this point. The good side of it is potentially that by removing Paul Mitchell, everyone else is now on the same page. So Paul Mitchell could have been one of those people who was on a different track, on a different wavelength, who his ideas didn't necessarily align with the general consensus behind the scenes of the Eddie Howes and the Steve Nixons and even maybe Piff as well. So positively speaking, if this removes that blocker, if you like, using project manager speak here, remove the blocker, then we could potentially be all on the same page, and therefore we can move forward quickly and effectively and get in exactly the kind of people that everybody seems to think we want. Now, whether that works out or not, we will just have to wait and see. But I think that is probably the better gamble than to sit on our asses, sit with thumbs up them for the next 2 months, trying to find the perfect fit. Bearing in mind, we don't even have a replacement from Darren Eales. I appreciate he's still there, but like, he's been leaving for 12 months and there's still no sign of a replacement as far as I can tell. We can't have that in this situation if we still want a director of football and if we want him to be the one who's making the decisions. It feels like something's going to have to change. And there goes Bobby.
Bobby's left for food.
Yeah, I think his signal just gave up. Much like me with this bloody saga. It's, as I said before, though, it is just so unbelievably depressing to have this situation not only happen, but happen so fast after we've just finished the season. Like you've barely had a chance to sort of pat yourself on the back as a fan and say, what a frigging great season that was. I can't wait to think about that again in my head. Boom. Right, now we're back to square one again. What the hell's going to happen next? We are basically shafted. So again, might be the worst thing in the world, might be a great thing, but it's something needs to change and something needs to happen in this transfer window, and it needs to happen fucking quick because it's the 20th of May now. Yeah. And that window opens on the 1st of June, doesn't it? And then
is there not two windows this year?
Yeah. Like it opens
for playing silly buggers with the windows again.
For this Club World Cup shite.
Yeah, so, but either way, we need to be primed and ready to cash in on people that need to sell. That's the big thing for me. If we have not bought in January, that was a gamble that we had money to spend for clubs that needed to sell in the summer window to make sure that we had that money up our sleeves to cash in, like Forest did with us, like Brighton did with us. We had to sell players we didn't want to sell. We need to be able to cash in on that with the likes of Aston Villa, with whoever else is in financial trouble and need to sell some of their players. To me, I think it was always this cloud hanging over the club ever since Mitchell came in because of the rough start that he had.
Off the scouting network. He said the scouting network is not fit for purpose. It's like, oh, cheers, Paul.
Yeah,
the seat's still bloody cold, mate. You haven't even sat down yet.
Exactly. Which is a weird thing to do. Which is a weird thing to say when they had so much success. I think we were going at around, I calculated, 80% success rate in and around that, which is phenomenal for a club to have. So it was very weird comments from the onset.
I think the thing is as well, it's like it showed a massive lack of awareness of the situation we found ourselves in, because we did not have the luxury of like buying in like 20, 20 players that were all youngsters and up and coming stars and hoping that some of them came good. We were in a relegation dogfight. We were bottom of the league like not so long after Eddie Howe took over. We needed to start winning games, and the club took a punt on some of the players. I still maintain, and I think it's come out now as well, that other people are thinking the same. I still maintain that the club were expecting Man City to trigger Bruno's release clause, and that was the 100 million that would get them out of PSR issues and allow them to continue building on. That obviously didn't happen, so we had to flog some youngsters. From that point of view, I think we all agree that they badly got it wrong and misjudged what they could spend. And from that point of view, yeah, the transfer strategy was not up to scratch. But first day in the new job, you don't go in and just slag off your current employers that are still working with you and tell them how crap a job they've been doing in the tabloids. It's like, that's not going to endear yourself to anybody. And it didn't really sit well with the fans either. So yeah, for me, look, it's one of those things where draw a line under it. Let's move on from him. Let's see what happens in the window. But above all else, the club need to back Eddie Howe now, and they need to give him like carte blanche control over this window and say, look, this is how much you have to spend. Go nuts, but that's all you're getting. That's what we have financially under PSR that we're allowed to spend. We're not going to jeopardize our future again and risk having to sell players when we don't want to. Bobby, you're back on deck now. Is it going to be a nervy wait for the transfer window for you now because of how desperate we are to make those early moves?
Yes and no. I think Nixon's proved in the past he can maneuver and he can negotiate. Andy Howe apparently has got some talent in that regards from Bournemouth, so I think we can make do. It's just, and I guess they would have been aware of the plans of Mitchell and the people he would have been scouting and looking at. So I know that they work in a very small group, but very like together in what they're trying to do. So I don't think, in that respect, it's going to be too bad. It's just I would have imagined that Mitchell would have done a lot of the legwork with it. So there's a bit of catch up, but I'm hoping that with what Nixon's done in the past, it's not going to be too much of a hiccup and we can keep going. But I think we just got to get going. As I said before, there's no excuse now. This window has to be a big success for us. We took the gamble, in the last couple of windows by not doing the work. So we had the PSR and we had the movements to make here. We've made Champions League. We have to capitalise, and that's what I'm watching for. And I think that we've got to be the ones that are the aggressor in the transfer market now.
Yeah, I genuinely don't understand why there couldn't be a compromise either, because if you look at it, then, Eddie Howe's asking for some first team ready players that are Premier League proven, that are going to step into his Champions League squad and be competitive and make them competitive in the Champions League and in the league and in the cups. But we also need to strengthen the squad depth. So there's still room for those players that Paul Mitchell wanted to bring in. So for me, it's a very strange situation. I guess it's done now, but yeah,
it's very strange because I think Lee, you mentioned it before. The likes of Bruno and Isaac and all that, they were unproven, not proven Premier League players. Yeah. Mate, where would we be without them now? I think there's a combination, and whether it's Eddie's fault or whether it's Paul Mitchell's fault, that's neither here nor there. But there had to be a compromise, and there had to be an overall strategy. And this is the disappointment with what I feel is that for a systematic club, so the Saudis do everything systematically. Howe does everything systematically. For some fucking reason, we can't get it systematically right at this level, and it breaks down. And that's what's frustrating for me, because if we get this right, the long term of this club is secured. And this is my worry, is that it's now not long term, it's window to window, and that's where I don't want my club to be, because we're a club that can be dominant for the next 10, 15 years if we get it right.
Yeah. I think that was always the thing of making sure it had that solid foundation for the future, more than just like, well, what does Eddie Howe need this time? Because if there's no guarantees Eddie Howe's going to be there in 12 months' time, he might take the England job. He might get a better offer from somewhere else. Maybe he has a shit run of form and he gets the sack. We don't know. Nobody knows what the future holds. The idea of the DOF was to make sure that you had that consistency, had that continuity. That's now up the spout again. But I guess we'll probably leave it there. I'll give Lee one last word about this, and then I think we'll head off because I think Bobby's got some food on the go. We've got State of Origin tonight in Queensland and New South Wales. So
yeah, hey, we get State of Origin too, mate. We like that's what the food is for. I've got mates coming around to watch it. So.
As long as it's the Maroons, mate.
It is, of course it is. I'm a Queenslander. You know.
Yeah, look, so I was just going to say there is also the element that we don't have real football people at the very top of the tree in this club either. So there's probably an element of learning on the job. So this is that season to season thing where they're like trying things and they're doing things. Maybe people are being advised to say, like, get a DOF in. Whose idea was that? Was it Mandy's? Was it Murdad's? Was it Rubens? Whose idea was that? It probably wasn't Eddie Howe's. So it came from somewhere. And it's just doesn't seem to be sticking just quite right. So I'll just end this up by saying absolutely shite preparation for the transfer window. Thank you very much, football and gods, for fucking nothing again. But we've had
and fucking Sunderland are coming back.
Yeah, fucking wankers. We've just had the season of a lifetime. It's been the best season any of us alive have probably seen. In Eddie we trust.
Indeed. Well, thanks a lot, gents. We'll leave it there before we all start slitting our wrists. It's not that bad. We do have a good summer ahead coming up, so we'll wait and see how things go. Thanks very much. Enjoy the football, the rugby, I should say, and we'll catch you in the near future with hopefully some good news about some future signings. Catch you later.
Cheers.